budget, the $129,470 applies, and that is line item 56.
Are you saying that if we vote this, that we can tell the school committee where to use money for a certain line item?
Well, that's a good question. I will, all right, the chair will not rule on that question. Does anybody? The question before the meeting is that the motion before us relates to transferring $129,470 from the stabilization fund, which according to the printed warrant shows up on line item number 56 and line item number 56 only. Does that mean that it can only, that money that is transferred from the stabilization fund can only be applied towards line item 56, or whether the school committee's freedom to make transfers between line items also extends to the amount that is transferred from the stabilization fund? Mr. Martyr.
Mr. Moderator, Everett Martyr, Copeland and Page, Town Council, through you to the previous speaker. The town meeting is authorized, as you've all been told, I think more than one time, to consider only the bottom line of the school committee budget. All of the other items that are shown here are for informational purposes only and are nice to have. Once the money is transferred, either appropriated, transferred from free cash, or transferred from the stabilization fund, wherever the source might be, it all goes into a pool of money. That pool of money is then available to the school committee to spend. So it might be for the purposes of convenience that the asterisk appears on line 56 and the stabilization money is being transferred to line 56. For all intent and purposes, once that vote is taken, you can forget that, because all of the money goes to line public schools, $8,450,279. That's where it goes. And then the school committee can move it any place within the budget it cares to under Chapter 71.
Thank you, Mr. Martyr. Mr. Jervy.
I was essentially going to say the same thing, but with one additional factor, and that is that even though we're not obliged to spend that money on teachers, that's exactly where we want to spend it. That's where it will be spent.
Mr. Burke, please state your name and address, sir.
Dave Burke, 11 Pomeroy Road. I just wanted to finally speak in terms of this amendment on the transfer from stabilization. I too thought that it might be a great idea to get that problem resolved, but it's begun to occur to me, and some of the comments from the Finance Committee and the exchanges that just occurred, I'm beginning to get a very strong sense that the Finance Committee is trying to intrude into the school committee's budgeting process and try to, by some method of indirection, which Town Council has just indicated isn't applicable anyway, trying to, in effect, mandate how that stabilization money should be spent. And we have an elected school committee, and the Finance Committee is not it. I'm beginning to get very concerned that people are jumping into areas that other people have been elected to fulfill, and that as a voter out here, I'm getting a little confused as to whose job is what. I don't think that the Finance Committee's proper role is to deal with that issue. It also would, if I understand you correctly, Mr. Moderator, would require that the main motion be carried by 2/3. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Which then means that the entire school budget is up for a 2/3 vote, which is a very difficult thing to do. And so I urge you in the strongest possible terms to defeat this amendment. Thank you.
On my right, please state your name and address, ma'am. Motion is to terminate debate on the motion to amend. All those in favor of terminating debate, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. On the motion to amend, which is to amend line items 56 through 100 to raise and appropriate $8,320,809 and to transfer $129,470 from the stabilization fund. All those in favor of the motion to amend, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The motion is lost. We are now back to the main motion. Mr. Goodwin, are you still seeking recognition?
Still Bill Goodwin, 16 Emerson Road, and I hope this mic still works. You know, I'm very fortunate this year. I just retired. I used to work nights. I was never able to come to one of these meetings. You know, and they're talking about hidden things in this annual town meeting warrant. You go to line 60, custodial expenses, $381,034. Then you go over to line 89, and you got custodial supplies, which is $22,000. Then we come down to line 93, we got building supplies and maintenance. Another $110,000. And when I went to school, utilities included everything. We have utilities in one line, we got oil on another. Isn't oil a utility anymore? So I'd like the school committee to explain some of these things if they could to me. Thank you.
Mr. Young. Please state your name and address, sir.
Roger Young, school business manager. The question, I believe, is that you're asking, why is it important to spend $360,000 for custodial services? The $360,000 provides the salaries for the custodians to take care of the high school, which there are 3, the middle school, which there are 3, 2 at the bachelor, and 2 at the Hood School. It also provides the salaries for 2 individuals working part-time to drive the to provide custodial and maintenance services at the different schools. One person spends 20% of his time at the little school, where we still have instructional program going on, and that we have another person who spends approximately 20% of his time doing general maintenance around the buildings. Those 2 gentlemen also provide the special ed transportation services for students in town, which we are doing to save money rather than doing with outside vendors. In addition, we have 1 full-time maintenance mechanic who takes care of the motors in the system, and we have 2 people who serve on the grounds to take care of the lining, the mowing, they help with the snow removal, and those 2 people are also assigned custodial duties at the various schools. So that is what the $360-some-odd thousand for salaries. The supplies that you mentioned of $20,000 takes care of the cleaning supplies that's required for the maintenance of the 5 schools. The $110,000 takes care of the needs that where we have to buy supplies, repair motors, repair roofs, and that sort of thing for the 5 school buildings and the 50-some-odd acres of land that we maintain.
Mr. Goodwin, just a follow-up question.
Yeah, 81, equipment maintenance, $40,215. What's this, another equipment maintenance?
In the equipment maintenance, that's primarily for...
You just said, hold it, sir, you just said that it comes out of the other appropriation.
No, what...
On the building supplies maintenance, you said the equipment maintenance came out of that.
for the buildings, that's correct. The equipment maintenance that I believe that you're referring to in line 81 is primarily for instructional equipment that's used in the education process, such as repairing computers and microscopes and things of that nature. Does that answer your question?
Any further discussion? We are now back to the main motion with no adhering amendments, which is for $8,450,279 for the support of the public schools as printed on page 30 of the warrant under sponsor's recommendation. On the main motion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. We are now back to line item 54 and 55. Mr. Daly.
Mr. Moderator, I move to appropriate the sum of $5,500 for line number 54 as printed in the sponsor recommends column as printed in the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Is there any, does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mrs. Holsing.
Finance Committee recommends.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Daly.
Mr. Moderator, I move to appropriate the sum of $4,150 for line number 55 as printed in the sponsor recommends column as printed in the warrant.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mrs. Holsing.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Daly.
Mr. Moderator, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we are now on line item 101. And
That is correct, Mr. Daly.
And we'll then go to line item number 23.
That is probably correct. Yes, pensions and benefits. We've skipped that. That is correct.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, I move to appropriate the sum of $195,866 for the purpose of funding the regional school district portion of the operating budget for FY93 as shown in line 101 as specified in Article 10 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation, Mrs. Holsing?
The Finance Committee recommends.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. On the motion under line item 101, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Daly.
Mr. Moderator, on line item number 23, I move to appropriate the sum of $1,774,309 for the purpose of funding line 23 of the FY93 operating budget as printed in the sponsor recommends column, along with the accompanying transfers as printed in the warrant under Article 10, and in addition a transfer of $199,000 from the stabilization fund.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mrs. Holsing.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Walsh, please.
Ray Walsh, 5 Sand Iron Way. I move to amend line item 23 to read $1,739,704 rather than the $1,774,309 printed on the warrant as sponsor and FinCom recommendations with the noted transfers as printed in the warrant.
Could the chair have your motion in writing, Mr. Walsh? Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Your motion. Would you care to speak on your motion, Mr. Walsh? You have the floor.
Excuse me. Yes, I would if I may, please.
You have the floor, Mr. Walsh.
The Finance Committee and the town administration or selectmen, on the basis of sponsor recommended salaries of $3,645,000 $1,062,062,062 proposed the $1,774,000.